Were you nervous at all about how to portray that character? Because it's a disabled veteran, and that is, or eventually becomes a disabled veteran. And I have to imagine that could be tricky, certainly, depending on how people receive it. Did you think about that? And was the character, I don't know, I'm not an actor, so I don't know any of this, but is that on the page, so to speak? Is it in the writing, or do you have to say, okay, I've got to tweak this way. I've got to bring this out, or I have to like add this flavor to what's written about this character?
Fear is a great motivator.
Yeah, it can be, for sure.
And as an actor, that's kind of me. I'm always fearful that I'm going to stumble or miss something or take something for granted that I shouldn't have or something. So I tend, when I get involved in something like that, I tend to do a lot of research, do a lot of searching, a lot of preparation to make sure that I'm going to, play whatever it is that I'm doing properly and as honestly as I could. And when you're, with Lieutenant Dan, I felt sort of an obligation in a way, a responsibility, as I was playing a wounded veteran, a wounded Vietnam veteran, to honor, those that I had met and those who had helped me, with my play, and the veterans at the VA that I'd met and the veterans in my own family. I felt a real obligation to tell that little story as honestly and faithfully as I could. So I tuned up. I really went to work on it. I remember one of the books I read when I was doing it was Lewis Puller Jr.'s book.
This is Chesty Puller's son, right?
Yeah, Chesty's son. And I don't know if you know that book. It's called Fortunate Son.
I don't know the book. I mean, I had forgotten about him actually and his story, which is tragic. But yeah, please get into it. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was a Vietnam veteran who got blown up, and lost his legs and one of his arms. And I mean, he struggled with alcohol and all kinds of stuff. And at the same time, he was the son of the greatest Marine of all time.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, so there's a very sad, powerful story of Chesty, who's this, it's Chesty Puller, he's like hardcore. And Lewis tells a story of being in a hospital bed and seeing his dad cry over his bed, seeing his son with his legs gone and all that. His legs were just vaporized with a mine that he stepped on. And it was a very powerful read and a powerful book to be reading when I'm about to play a guy who gets blown up and loses his legs and has to go and goes into, alcohol abuse and all that stuff after Vietnam. And so it was a powerful book to be reading at the time. I spent some time, researching the amputation, that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, making sure I understood the challenges of somebody who had, lost his legs in battle. We did boot camp stuff, which was kind of cool because backing up a year to Tracers, I wanted to do like a boot camp for Tracers, so I took my cast. We were actually doing the play in January, right? So it was cold as hell in Chicago and in the Midwest, but somebody actually had a relationship with a summer camp that was closed down for the winter. And they said we could use the closed down summer camp to go isolate ourselves and kind of workshop Tracers. So we went and we did sort of a mock military camp, and we set it up. I had the drill instructor who was a wonderful actor. You may remember him, Dennis Farina.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Dennis was our drill instructor in the show. And I said, Dennis, we're going to go up to this summer camp and you're going to beat the hell out of us up there. Wake us up in the middle of the night, do whatever you got to do to be the drill instructor. But I want to whip my cast into shape. So we did that for tracers. And I thought, I sure hope we do that for Lieutenant Dan and the platoon. And sure enough, we did it. We even got, Oliver Stone got a guy named Dale Dye.
Yeah.
Dale was a Marine in Vietnam. And, he said, Dale, I want you to be, teach these guys how to be, soldiers. And so they went out and for platoon and lived in the jungle and all of that. So Dale started to build a business where he was like the go-to military tech advisor in town. Yep. And anytime there was a military movie, they were calling Dale up to whip the cast into shape. Well, that's what Bob Zemeckis, our director on Forrest Gump, did. He got Dale to whip us into shape. So we went out and lived in the woods for 3 or 4 days, slept out there, bugs and snakes and all that. We were in South Carolina shooting Forrest Gump. And we lived out there, and that was an extremely valuable experience to get prepped to play the lieutenant.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about planning and leadership and all, military leadership, all that kind of stuff, by just having to tell a platoon what to do every day when I was out there.
Yeah.
And Dale worked hard with me on that. So by the time we started shooting Forrest Gump and the military stuff, I don't know if you remember Forrest Gump, but there's a scene where Lieutenant Dan is marching his platoon down the road, and Forrest Gump said, Lieutenant Dan would just tell us to sit down, get down, and shut up. And Lieutenant Dan said, get down, shut up. Well, that was the first scene we shot with the platoon of the Vietnam stuff. So I felt like, okay, we were ready to go, at that point. So the preparation to play Lieutenant Dan was very, very valuable. I never neglect to prep for something that I'm like something that I'm going to step out of myself a lot into something else. I want to always make sure that I'm studying up enough to do it. I played presidents, Harry Truman, and all the. Yep. And there's a lot of preparation that goes into playing those kind of parts.
Yeah, for sure. So at what point? So you finished this movie. At what point was it? Right after you had shot it and screened it, where you were like, "This is really different and special," or did it take? Was it the actual reception from people? Like, at what point was it clear that this was kind of a unique film that was different?
Well, we made it we shot it in 93, and we shot a bunch of, we shot the Vietnam stuff, the shrimping, a few other things in Beaufort, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back to Los Angeles, and the crew went on to Savannah, Georgia, and they went on to some different places. And then they were going to come back to LA, and we were going to finish up the rest of the movie in Los Angeles. So I had a little time off. Good thing, because I was injured on the final day of shooting for me, which was the final day of shooting the Vietnam stuff, was when Forrest Gump carries me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you talked about this.
Yeah. And he carries me out of the, bombs are going off and, whatever. He carries me out and dumps me on the riverbank there. Well, we did that. We did, my thigh was on his shoulder here. He had me like that fireman's carry over his shoulder, and my thigh was kind of bouncing up and down on his shoulder, like take after take. And the last take, he set me down, and I went to get up at the end of the shot, and I couldn't. My leg just gave out. There was a massive bruise where his shoulder had just like a jackhammer into my thigh. So luckily I had, I had 3 weeks or so back in Los Angeles by myself to rehabilitate that and get ready to play Lieutenant Dan in the wheelchair. And the New York stuff was all shot in Los Angeles on the street. And, some of that other stuff was shot in Los Angeles. We finished up December 93. The movie came out July 6th, 1994. They showed it to us maybe a week or two before it opened. And the nature of that story, and I've said this before, is, you know, if you look at Lieutenant Dan, right, he's a small part of the story. So I didn't really work with Sally Field or
Okay, yeah.
Robin Wright, or,
Right.
you know, one
Yep.
little scene with Sally and Robin, but at the wedding, but, you know, worked with Michael T. Williamson a little bit on the Bubba stuff, you know, in the platoon. But most of my work was with Tom. So I really didn't know what Robin or anybody else was doing in the movie.
Yeah, yeah.
When you see the movie and you see it all put together, we all looked at each other at the end of that screening, and everybody was just pretty happy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.